And hello, greetings and salutations. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it is in the world, wherever you are watching this. This is the Authority Brand. I am Kurt Mercadante. Thank you for joining us. For those joining us live, for those listening to the archive version on our podcast, welcome as well. Before we get started, to all those joining us live, I invite you, I implore you, I urge you, don't just be a lurker. Come in, share your city, your state, your name, your town, your country, your continent, wherever in the world you're joining us from. Don't be afraid to share your thoughts, your agreements, your disagreements. Throw some virtual oranges at us, whatever. Our guest today is a singer-songwriter. She's used to hecklers, or maybe not, I don't know. She's used to being in front of an audience, so please join us. And by the way, I want to urge all of you, I got free goodies for you. If you need some help building your authority brand, leveling up LinkedIn, whatever it is, take out your smartphone right now. Text the word YouAuthority, Y-O-U, authority, to the number 55678 on your smartphone. And in return, you'll get an auto text with a bunch of free stuff. Free webinars on how to build your authority brand, level up your LinkedIn, use podcast to build your authority brand. You can subscribe to the Authority Brand podcast. If you're not subscribed, I don't know what the hell you're doing and what you're thinking, but subscribe and you can schedule a strategy call with me. So let's jump in to today's episode. And we have a wonderful guest today. I finished this book, this soul-sourced entrepreneur. Our guest is Christine Kane. Now, Christine started out as she didn't start out as a singer-songwriter. She pursued that after trying some other things, letting her intention guide her to becoming a singer-songwriter. In 2010, she opened Uplevel You, a company that serves the ever-growing class of sensitive, idea-driven, aggression-averse entrepreneurs, in a class she counts herself a member of. And she lives in Asheville, North Carolina, which isn't far from where I am right now. Wonderful city. Love the mountains. Christine Kane, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. I'm really, really excited to be here.
And I love how you describe, who your company serves, the sensitive, idea-driven, aggression-averse entrepreneurs. And that's a little different than what we see. And you write about them in your book. Sometimes I call them vanity vendors, right? Mm-hmm. And sometimes I call them the hustle and grind pornographers. People who are like, put your head down, eat shit, just put your head through the wall, and waking up, building your company, selling is all about adrenaline and cortisol and just tensing yourself up. What's wrong with that mindset?
Well, the biggest challenge I have experienced with it with my clients is that you need so much more of it to keep going. So if you set your business up from that place and you're not that way, because some people are naturally that way, then you require that over and over again. And ultimately, your business becomes a lot more work for you because now you're having to find that and get that rolling each and every time, as opposed to operating from a more natural and tuned in place, if that's the way you are.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. My wife and I were talking about this yesterday, and I'm a big fan of the Tao Te Ching. A lot of people ask me, what's your favorite business book? Now, yours is going to be on the list because I love it and the way it incorporates these things. I often tell people, and you and I were introduced together by John David Mann. And so up there's The Go-Giver and the series of books by John David Mann and Bob Berg, who, by the way, is going to be on the show in a couple of weeks. But I also often tell them the Tao Te Ching, 2,500 years old. You wouldn't think it's a business book, but there's a common theme through your book. And instead, my wife and I were talking about this yesterday in terms of setting kind of like some family rules. And part of my thing is, should we even have rules? And I'm a big fan of what the Chinese call Wu Wei, which loosely translated is effortless action. And, when you talk about that and you talk about the reason for your book of, and how do you put it, you write that business owners are told they must be strategy-driven, data-led, aggressive, even manipulative, and they see Crush It, 10X It, Unfuck It as popular titles. That's that adrenaline, cortisol. Just, it doesn't matter if you're doing the right thing. Just keep chopping down trees. You may be in the wrong forest. They may be the wrong trees, but just keep chopping them down. Yeah. And my wife and I talked about, like, with the kids, we have 4 children. Just try harder and try. I'm like, you know what? I think that's the wrong message. Yeah. So, and it's somewhere along the lines of go with the flow.
So, yeah. And I started writing this because I worked with so many clients who had been attracted to me because I had been a musician, and I had to learn business from that place. I'd gone into music thinking I'm just going to be discovered. And then I learned it's a lot of work to have a business, and learning how to be who I am and roll with that flow without being all of these ways everyone started saying. Even in the music business, all the executives I was meeting, they wanted me to be different from who I was so that I would attract this person's audience or this person's audience. And we end up becoming little approval whores if we're not careful. And so as I worked one-on-one with people, and I taught marketing and I taught sales, it was a matter of being able to take those strategies, but also weave them through the individual. Each person has their own way of being and doing their business that's perfect for them. And of course, a lot of stuff comes up, but you don't have to hustle through it. You don't have to plow through it. You don't have to hurt yourself in having a business.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I mean, you went from singer-songwriter to Uplevel You.
Mm-hmm.
But let's back up a little bit, because the singer-songwriter thing didn't happen. You didn't just wake up, become a singer-songwriter. It was something that perhaps was there that you had to draw out of yourself while working in a completely different career, right?
Yeah. So you and I, before this started, you talked about how you had a PR firm. I worked for Ogilvy and Mather PR right out of college. And then I had that moment of just, I know there's something different for me. And that's that moment each of us are called toward. I just did a podcast on my podcast called The Breakdown Before the Breakthrough. And I had that breakdown of just, I can't live like this. And so learning, stepping in, setting an intention, becoming a singer-songwriter, becoming a performer required that I shift out of all these, doubts and negative stuff and fear of the 9-to-5 world that I came from. And I had to build a lot of skill sets, whether it was, writing songs, performing, sound, guitar, everything. And alongside that, it was about building the business of having a music career, because my big wake up call was no one's coming to discover me. I thought that people would discover me, but they didn't. I had to discover myself, and the business I built around it was in some ways pure joy to me, because it showed me how to build something that can really support the creativity and the passion of someone. And so people started asking me, how did you do that? Because you're an artist, you're not wired this way. And so over the years, I just started creating trainings and programs and coaching people on how you do this. And that's what this book came from. Was one of my clients just said to me, more people need to know about this mindset side of things that you teach, what I call the soul track, which is why it's called the Soul Sourced Entrepreneur. And I sat down starting in about 2016 and began writing this book.
There's in the book, you talk about having a coach or a strategist. I can't remember what he was called or whatever he called. And I had a business strategist who refused to call himself a coach, and et cetera. And as I was reading, I was thinking, I had a business strategist who helped me with the numbers, and we grew the numbers, but I grew to hate the more the numbers got better from a balance sheet perspective, the more I hated my company. So when he found out that I shut down my company, he's like, what? Because that soul track, I don't think he got, and and it was funny. He would get defensive, when I'd tell him well, I've always loved my businesses, but you know what? He told me stories of how he didn't see his kids or his family for years at a time while he was traveling for work. A couple of years ago, he had a heart attack from stress and overwork and all these things. And so you see that. Can you? So it's an interesting. There's not a lot of context. That's why I love long form discussions like this, because people can misunderstand certain things. And when you talk about being soul sourced or being on the soul track instead of the strategy track, when we talk about being in a state of flow instead of a state of grind, when you talk about the difference between, and you talk about it in your book, flow and surrender, and you jumped in to being a singer-songwriter, you jumped into something different. People think they don't understand that middle ground between, well, you're saying you don't have to work hard. You obviously worked hard. And then they think, well, okay, she just did it and she surrendered and sat back and everything came to her. where's that middle ground? Because I think a lot of people get lost, and they'll even write to me like, you're just preaching laziness, right? And you obviously aren't lazy. You built a multi-million-dollar coaching company or a successful singer-songwriter after doing something else. Where's that kind of middle ground that is so hard to grasp or understand sometimes?
That's such a good question. Let me check with you. Is my sound really weird? Because I just realized my headphones are doing something wonky. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, can hear you great. Yeah.
Sure. Well, it's a great question. And the fact that you brought up the Tao Te Ching, what I often find people do is they get so overworked and they get so stressed out. And then they go find some, wonderful, some sort of spiritual practice. And then they take that idea of letting go to mean, oh, I'll just sit here, screw it. I'm just going to eat some Pringles and sit here and watch Netflix and or whatever their version of surrender is. And what I've seen with a lot of my clients is that the idea of having an intention can sometimes feel very painful to them because they don't know how to work with it and stay in relationship with it. And the whole foundation of this book is broken up into 4 parts, and they're an acronym. And the acronym is I'm in. And so what you're just asking is why I base everything, because I see people want to avoid or turn away, or what's ultimately happening is their ego co-opts the spiritual principle of surrender and turns it into an ego thing, which means now I'm just going to not do anything. We'll see what happens now. And what you just said is so true. It's that fine line that you walk where there is work, there is achievement, there is intention. Someone's got to drive this thing. But I think you learn how to, like you said, the word flow, you learn how to be in that. That's what this book is trying to teach people how to do. I took on an enormous task with this, but I'm trying to show people every angle of how they get in their own way, and that you pull those little tiny things that you cling to off, and you really see the way is much easier. But it does require facing some stuff, and it really requires being brave and being present each and every day. But it's not about, like we started off talking, that drive and that, strategy driven craziness that sent your strategist into the hospital.
Yeah, right. And that word intention comes up obviously throughout the book. Let's start there in an intention and being intentional, because I think a lot of people work hard and they chop down a lot of trees without intention. And so they're like, I have blood, I have sweat and tears, and this isn't working, therefore I'm going to give up.
Yeah.
Versus doing something with intention. How do you define, you define it in the book, but for our listeners, how do you define intention?
So, there's a lot of different ways that people do in define it, but the way I look at it is that intention is a desire or dream or destiny sometimes. Like sometimes it really is what you were meant to do. And you take that's our human side of it, and then you merge that with your energy, your attention, your focus, and your direction. And so when you take those 2 pieces and parts and you move with them, what tends to happen is that intention evolves. A lot of us want to think that we just put it out there and then the universe slams it back at us. And what we have to do is recognize that intention also brings up anything unlike itself. So if you set that intention, you're going to often see all the ways, like for me as a musician, I saw all the ways I wasn't ready for it. And instead of, throwing in the towel and saying you're not cut out for this, which is how I opened the whole book, is a strategist telling me I wasn't cut out for it, you start to learn how to navigate and see each thing as the sign that it is. And so your intention is always working. It's always moving things forward. It's just clearing the dirt out of the way. And a lot of us look at the dirt as the obstacle, and the dirt is just there to show you what's in the way, what's in the way, what's in the way. So intention, yes, it's a theme throughout the whole book, but I use intention and I teach intention with everything we do. Even with something like this, I teach like intention prior to doing any meeting, anything you do, because it is that powerful, how you choose to show up. And it starts to make your life a lot more about effortlessness because you bring your whole being into each relationship you have, whether it's a relationship with your business, relationship with your peers, relationship with another podcaster, or your clients.
And it really spills into everything, when we talk about your business, specifically, time and productivity management, or, priority management, but also sales and branding. If you obviously growing your business takes clients. And there's a lot of folks who, when you get down to it, they spend their day doing everything except having conversations. Conversations could be online. They could be picking up the phone. They could with potential clients. And it's like, well, how did you spend your day? And, I have some of my clients like, let's take a time log. Let's look at how you spend your day. And that word intention could not be used to describe how they spend any hour in their day. And they're doing everything over here instead of like, and you talk about ideal clients a lot throughout the book and talking about that and focusing on our ideal client. But that takes almost some courage. And it certainly takes intention, because listen, this is my client. It's not that if this client comes to me and wants to talk and I feel I can help them, I'm not going to say, no, get out. But if you really want to build a company, and you built a multi-million-dollar company, and you talk about, I'm not a huge, you're growing, you have nice office space, all those things, but you have freelancers, you got finite time. So if you're going to go fishing, you got to be intentional about which pond you want to fish in. And all of that means the rest of your day has to be built around intention. So you're not just spinning your wheels over here and saying, I'm working so hard on this company and nothing's happening.
Yeah. And a lot of times when it comes to that work, the kinds of people who think they're terrible at business tend to be the very best at that. Because the way I teach, for instance, ideal client, is that you don't go out and decide, that's my client, I'm going to go grab them, and that's my client, I got to figure this out. The process of intention and the process of ideal clients and the process of finding your marketing message is actually more like mining than it is like grabbing. So it's not figuring it. We all want to go up here and figure it out. And that's why it can get so painful for a lot of people, because you're already instinctively wired to understand stuff about this and about what to do. But that part of us that's like, show me the money, is all up in here. And that's where we get all nervous and adrenaline flowing, and we forget, oh, I have to take some time to get clear. And I have to take some time to know what this is I'm doing. Not 10-year plans and 5-year plans, but understanding who am I serving and who am I, and honoring your choices, and honoring the fact that marketing is about people both selecting and unselecting. And the ones that go away for a reason. And you, when you set your message up really well, and when you set your marketing up really well, and you talk to people like you just said, when you connect, they self-select, and that's where it does all start to flow. And I'm not trying to act like, oh, it's all woo and magical. There is work to be done, but the real work to be done is going without fear. We might have some fear, but some really courageous movement inside to say, what is this business about? What am I about? What's my message? I teach something I call the Foundation 5, which is the foundation underneath all of your marketing. And it's who you serve, the results you offer, the problems you solve, the message you teach, and the value you deliver. And each one of those is an area where you go deep within, and it could be said that it really is an intention activity, because it's that important for how you form and fulfill your marketing promise and your messages that you put out there.
Yeah, and that goes, everything you just mentioned goes beyond marketing. I would say it helps your mindset when you wake up in the morning, instead of waking up and saying, I need to convince or coerce someone to reach into their pocket and give me money unwillingly for something they wouldn't normally want to buy. That's like some people go through life like that.
Well, so much of business I've realized, and I've been in, since music, I've been in this, like, I've not had a job since 93. I've just been doing this for a long, long time. And I think so much of business, what I've seen with a lot of the strategists and marketing strategists, and I mean no harm at all, but there's a lot of fear-based stuff. There's a lot of fear-based decisions. There's a lot of fear-based intentions. And it's almost like, instead of what do I want, we default to what I think I can get. And so it's not a matter of really putting out there. It's a matter of like going in and looking around, and like we climb into people's, well, they can't afford that, and I'll do it this way. And that's where I think some of the little manipulative stuff happens, because we haven't learned how to trust ourselves. We haven't learned how to trust our own clarity. And probably because we haven't taken the time to go there.
You mentioned the word trust, and I have my notes. It's actually the first thing I have written down. It was at the beginning of the book. But it's such a powerful sentence, and I'd love for you to delve into it more. But a world that can't be trusted is a world that must be controlled. And forget business. You could apply this to everything going on in the world today. I would say your business, your life, your relationships. Can you delve more into that sentence more for those who are listening, who might be so used to, I need rules, and I need stringent rules, and I need to write down the rules, and I need someone to rule over me. And you talk about the old rules and the new rules. And so I'd love for you to delve into that more.
Yeah. So the context around that is that I had a guy apply for my director of operations job who had worked for pretty much every famous big name guru ever, and was giving me a lecture about how I needed to wake up out of all this stuff. And he was very controlling. And I had about a week where I kind of went fetal afterwards, because I felt so sad for myself and like, oh my God, am I just pathetic? And it comes back to when we aren't able to really understand that our businesses are the territory of our own expansion and are teaching us constantly. What we tend to do is go into, I've got to control this world. I've got to have, like you talked about with your kids, I've got to have rules, and we got to have, there's standards and rules, and here's how you do things in business. And there are some best practices that do indeed work, but that whole idea of learning how to trust, that is not something I can say to somebody, just trust or just relax or any of that. That is the process we're talking about of having a business, because we often feel so clueless, and the world right now feels so out of control. And ultimately, we all know in our heart of hearts, the world is not in our control. And yet, when we start doing tactics and we step out of integrity, what we're ultimately saying is, I have no trust. I don't trust in myself. I don't trust in my intention. I don't trust in the universe. And I certainly don't trust in my clients. And so I'm going to slap down many, many, many control measures for this, and I won't let go ever. And I think it creates illness. I think it creates mental illness. I think it creates emotional illness. And it doesn't have to be that way, but this is why so many of my clients work with me for year after year after year, because they start to develop this sense of trust in themselves, and our coaching relationship becomes a relationship. They aren't giving me all the power, not that I let them ever do that in the first place, but yeah, essentially that word trust, it was my word of the year. I have a whole little ebook called the Word of the Year Discovery Tool, like picking a word in a year instead of a list of shit you got to get done kind of thing. And that was my word this year, was to really trust. And it's been a good one, because wow, if there was ever a year we needed to trust.
Yeah, I think that society, and when I say society, I mean, this probably goes back thousands of years, is built around the fact that people telling us you shouldn't trust yourself, that life is lived from without going in instead of from within out. And so we learn to believe that everything we need is out there. Everything we need is based on, I often tell people, the biggest change in my life was when I stopped praying to beg and started praying to thank. Thank you for giving me everything I need. Now, that doesn't mean your strengths don't match up. You may have some weaknesses, delegate, outsource, etc. But when you trust yourself, you mentioned it earlier, and you talk about it in the book, when you sit down and people tell you, just come up with your vision.
Yeah.
And, I coach people on vision, and it's like, it took me it took me 42 years to figure out my vision, but you can't, if you sit down and you don't trust yourself enough to think through it, and you're like, I can't think of my vision now, so I need to buy 6 more books that tell me the rules for coming up with your vision, you're going to be there for decades because it's without, you don't trust yourself.
Yeah, and also one of the things that has happened, and you described this, and I have this in the book, is in the business coaching world, in the business strategy world, one of the first things people say to you is, "What's your plan? What's your 10-year plan? What's your vision? What's your purpose?" As if you're just going to blurt that out and have that right there at the ready, and as if it's always going to be the same forever. And vision and values and trust, again, it really takes a consistent willingness to go and be in relationship with you and be in relationship with this thing you call your business. And I know that sounds like, for someone who's never done it, it's like, oh, screw you. This just sounds all like, kumbaya. And it's not. It really is a very pointed, clear, intentional thing that you start to live by. And I don't even know if I answered your question.
No, you absolutely did. And you talk about tactics, and I think you call it tactics or window dressing. People, it's easy to latch on to tactics because you don't trust yourself. And I see this all the time. Well, I don't trust myself, and I don't know who my ideal client is, and I don't know how to run my business. So, oh gosh, pay-per-click. If I just throw everything into pay, and I use pay-per-click, insert whatever tactic there is. And yeah, strategy before tactics is important, but before you even get there, what are you doing this for? Where, and I'm trying to think of questions that aren't limiting enough, but it goes beyond, like you said, the 5 and 10 year plan. But if you died in 20 minutes or 20 years, what is there? What's going on? It's not like a quantifiable Google spreadsheet number. It's, I have a client who's, he, and you talk about inputs at the end, and we define our lives by these. Now you put inputs in terms of the incoming of distraction.
Yeah.
But often we create our own distractions by defining, all right, where do you want to go? I want to have, and you have a dollar amount. And it's like, I finally had a breakthrough with the clients. Like his one of the outcomes he wanted for the year is have a stress-free and joyous holiday season. Is that quantifiable? Where does that go on the bar graph, right? It's something that's just not tangible, which I guess is the difference between soul sourced and strategy track, right?
Yeah. So and the strategy track is important. So just for context, the way I set the book up is that there's two. I always say to my clients, there's 2 tracks in your business. The strategy track, which is all the stuff we're talking about, even tactics can be there, but underneath it all is the soul track, and they're actually running side by side. And knowing yourself and knowing your intention, it starts to inform the strategy track. Because, for instance, since we're talking money, if someone sets a price, if someone says, oh, well, they told me I should raise my price to this much, but you have a past of being terrified or being in a world where no one made more than X amount, then it's going to be really hard until you really deeply look at that for you to be able to raise your price to that next level. And so all of it comes into play. And what you're describing is that intangible thing that each of us has that no one can know for you. Where's the block for you?
Kind of talking about whether it's your programming or conditioning that you grew up with a kind of a scarcity mindset. Well, no one made more than that, or you have that mindset. Or you talk, I think his name was John, you write about in the book, who had, I'm in the greed business, and you talk about he had a small-minded, it's just very scarcity mindset. How do you work with someone to overcome that scarcity mindset, which can, manifest in limiting beliefs? I'm too afraid to focus on an ideal client because it's so much easier to fish in the ocean, right? Because there's so many fish instead of going into the smaller pond. Where do you start with someone who has that scarcity mindset that manifests itself in all of these different ways?
Well, the first thing I start to do is, because whenever we learn something new, we learn it up here. So the first thing I do is I have something I call the abundance 4x4. And I would send people to it because it was a free download on my site. And I don't know that it's there anymore now that the book is out.
Well, if it is, we'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. But the abundance 4x4, I have something I call Planet Abundance and Camp Scarcity. And most of the world, and it's the actions and behaviors in both of those areas. And most of the world is set up in what I call camp scarcity. And it's really how they manage. It's the behaviors they have, the beliefs they have, and the behaviors they jump into from those beliefs. So it's like the difference between, like, competition is an element of, like, a belief in camp scarcity, competition. And the opposite of that is creativity. And knowing that, it's just a different way of setting things out there. And I'm trying to think of something really, really applicable to somebody who has scarcity, where, like, when I said the whole idea of, instead of going for what you want, going for what you think you can get, what I tend to call that, like, especially when it comes to pricing, the habit I see people do, the action I see people do, is they do what Dan Kennedy used to call climbing into other people's wallets. So instead of saying, here's how much I want to charge for this, what you do is you look around at all the people around you and you go, well, they couldn't afford that, and there's no way they'll pay that. And what you do is you shrink to that. So what I teach these concepts to my clients at the start. We start with all of the ideas. And what I do throughout our year of working together is I watch and let those ideas start to enter, because we have to start embodying this stuff. And it becomes somatic. It becomes a part of our being, and we catch ourselves in those moments. And so breaking that scarcity habit is often about doing it scared. It's about having the awareness first and knowing your typical blocks. And then it's about doing it scared, having an accountability person, or coach, somebody there holding you while you're stepping into this big higher level of success. And then celebrating, like you talked about gratitude, celebrating each and everything that you do, each and every time you're able to break through some old mindset that said, you don't get to have that. Not you, everybody else, but not you. The other thing I teach is something I call the guilt outrage coin. And so when you are operating in scarcity, you tend to either feel outraged at other people for making money. So you hear somebody, got their first $10,000 client, and you think, well, screw you. You're just screwing people over. You should be out doing good in the world. That's the outrage. But then when it comes time for you to actually attract to you, the coin flips. And you have to match the outrage that you had for other people, and you go into, like, guilt. So that outward comes now inward and collapses into guilt and shame. And when I coach people, I'm really having them watch their own mindset and energy so that they can see it in the moment and be like, oh, there I am. That's that thing. And instead of then pounding themselves and saying, this is bad, law of attraction says I'm going to now attract really bad stuff, we start to be with it, and you start to have compassion for it, and you let that, you watch the pattern, and then you take action. You exit the coin, like you exit the guilt outrage coin, you leave that over there, and then you take action from neutral. I call it accessing neutral. And that's a whole process in and of itself. I write about it in the book, but it's not easy, but that's where I start with the awareness, and then we move into, how do you practice this every day, as opposed to just a nice little concept that, oh, that sounds cool.
Yeah.
I love sense, or was that just, whoa?
No, it does, because, when you talk about programming, I mean, from what I've read, between age 1 and 7, you're in that theta state where they program your software, they meaning people around you. And so if you find, we've homeschooled our kids for 14 years, and we take an approach that really is, I guess it would be more of a soul sourced education approach. But we watch Shark Tank because it's fun, but it's also, there's some math, there's some creativity. They learn about, I think, the guilt outrage, paradigm, or the people who said, but I worked so hard and I deserve your $500,000 and those types of things. But I often say that if you're someone, and I know people like this, I won't name names, but they'll watch Shark Tank and they'll say, oh my gosh, doesn't he, pick a shark, she have enough money? I say he because usually it's like aimed at like a Mark Cuban, right? Because he's the richest guy. Doesn't he have enough money? And they're just throwing their money around. It must be nice. And I call those people the scarcity pimps, because they want to infect you with that scarcity virus. So what you talk about is so important, whether you're setting, whether you decide I'm in a life that I can't stand like you did, and you change it. Maybe it's not a life that you can't stand, but just a life of that quiet desperation. To break out of that what you just described. It's not like, okay, boom. I once had a client say, well, how do you go from scarcity to abundance? As if it's like, here's a pill.
Overnight. Yeah.
Red pill, blue pill, whatever. And all of a sudden you do it. So yeah, what you described, a lot of this, there's a lot of gray area stuff here. That's not just, I mean, you talk about working with your clients for a year, right? It's not like, hey, work one session on Monday, done.
Well, I just got a video from one of my clients. It was a testimonial, and she started a year ago, and she was making $35,000 a year as a coach. And she is well into her 6-figure year this year after 1 year working. And it sounded like, I was watching it, I was going, this sounds almost magical. And what people don't realize is that I also witnessed her when she was terrified to have, put out her first package, and all the things that she worked through and came through. But what starts to happen is that we do it. It's like, it is like riding a bike. You start to do it and you realize, oh, hey, I didn't die. Oh, hey, this does happen, and you start to trust in yourself, back to that word trust. But I think one thing I would say is that it is possible, because when I started out as a musician, I was that person that you just described. I thought that just because I put it out there, I should get, I was waiting to be discovered. I was waiting to be rescued. I wanted someone else to do my business. I had a little bit of a diva inside of me, and she was a little whiny, a little needy. And the thing I have loved and so appreciated about business, with all of its challenges, is that it truly forced me and shaped me up and out of that little victim self, that little side of me. And it taught me so many different ways of navigating this world. And what I call, the whole section 2 of the book is called Managing Your Power and Managing Your Energy. And it taught me how to see this. It's just like you said, it's conditioning. It's what we've been conditioned to believe, and none of it's true at all.
Energy. And you brought up energy. And gosh, I guess before I started changing in my life, right? And I was the numbers guy. I was the strategy-based guy. I was, hey, I'm a dude, right? I'm supposed to earn money and have a heart attack and die, right? If 5 years ago, Kurt, if I had told him that I'd be talking about energy and energy flow with someone, they'd say, what are you, a hippie? Right? But you talk about energy flow, and my goodness, people think it's woo-woo. It's like the third law of thermodynamics. And I'm not that smart, right? But it's energy can neither be created nor destroyed. It can change from one form to another. So you talk about energy in different parts of the book. You just mentioned it. And your quote in the book is, your energy is always speaking to you. How? And what does that mean? And for someone watching saying, this is woo-woo witchcraft, hippie stuff, why is energy just so important to your day, to your intention, to your life?
So what I say, well, there's a whole section in the book that says, it's called Energy Doesn't Lie. And I will share an example. Like, for me, the way I'm teaching it is that when you set an intention in your business, you plant the seed. And when we plant a seed, the first thing that comes up is not the sprout. The first thing that comes up is the dirt. So it's anything unlike that intention. And the example I give in the book is, when I was a musician, I started working with a coach who changed my whole life, because he worked with me this way. And I had started getting a little successful, but I kept running into the same old obstacles. And I had all of this. He wanted me to clean out my basement. And this is going to sound very weird, but my basement had in it all these old clothes, all this old furniture, all this stuff. And I hit this point where I just could not get rid of this one big stack of furniture in my basement. And my coach said to me, tell me about that. And I said, well, if my music thing doesn't work out, I might wish I had it. And he was like, so you'll be on the street, but you'll have that bookcase? Like, I don't get it. And that's when it was almost like he took me by the shoulders and said, all right, he said, here's what's happening in your life right now. You are setting an intention for the universe that you want to succeed as a musician. And yet, in the very foundation of your home, you have the truth, which is furniture that says, I won't succeed. You're taking a physical representation and saying, I don't even believe in my intention at all. And that's what prompted me to finally let go of my plan B, you know, whatever I was holding on to, whatever we cling to say, oh no, I can't possibly let this go. And what I've seen time and time again is that people say they want one thing, but what's really happening creates a chaotic vibration. That's what he called it. It's a chaotic vibration. You have your intention, but then you have your energy, which does not lie. And the energy is where are you really, where are you really living, as opposed to the thing you say you want? Are you living in resentment? Are you clinging to old things? Do you have tons of clutter? Are you in a relationship, a marriage, a partnership, a business that you can't stand, a job you hate, whatever it might be? If you're holding on, then that's out of congruence. It's a chaotic vibration. And so that's where, and no one can talk about thermodynamics and energy, but if anyone really looks at their life and they say, where am I off with my intention? You'll see people start to get uneasy. Like when I do my retreats, you'll see people in the room being like, oh, damn. They can see it and we all know it. But that's that trust thing of, if I let this go, do I really trust in the power of intention? And most people don't. And so they hold on to things. It's the back to the what I think I can get thing. And when you're really letting go, it takes an enormous step forward and just saying, I'm going to do this.
In the book, you read about your Dear God letter. And I feel, to me, based on what you just said, that's when you finally put on paper your intention and maybe realize that some of the oars were going in a different direction and pulling you back with that chaotic vibration. And a lot of people, I tell them I shut down my PR and ad agency, and they're like, what are you dumb?
I love that story too.
Like, what are you, stupid? Like, why didn't you want to sell it? And it's like, well, I was in denial. If I wasn't in denial, I would have built a runway for 3 years and sold the thing off. But I woke up one morning, and for people who don't understand it, it's, you talk about intention from an intention toward. Mm-hmm. When the pain, there's in my book, the subtitle was escaping your comfort zone of misery. Because it could be miserable, but it's a comfort zone, and you just sit there for years. But when it gets so loud that your energy is like, you're getting sucked in the black hole, and you're either going to get in that black hole and die, or it's like, in order to get out of this black hole, I have to turn all thrusters toward getting me the hell out. Mm-hmm. If you're not in that situation, people think you left money on the table, you did all this stuff. Mm-hmm. And I tell that story, and you talk about, obviously cleaning out your basement. I had that written down, cleaning out your basement, Christine, clean out your basement and what that means. But what do you think, talking to someone who, it's like, okay, you're in a W-2 job. Mm-hmm. You've been stopping and starting this side hustle for years, and it's wonderful. And that I can tell that's where you want to go. But your W-2 job or a series of W-2 jobs kind of keep you back, and your energy is over there. Mm-hmm. How do you get them to, well, it's irresponsible to tell them just quit your damn job and put your thrusters toward where you want to go. It's people in their minds, that's irresponsible.
It's a very multi-layered question, because when I coach someone, I actually use different ways I work with people. So I use the Enneagram. I use Kathy Kolbe's amazing Kolbe A index. And for some people, they are not wired up for that kind of risk. It's going to be a little harder. So I don't do the whole leap and the net will appear thing for everyone. But there is a time where that's what it's going to feel like, no matter what, that you're going to have to give all of you to that thing. And I remember for me, when I left my cubicle job, wasn't that I was making a lot of money. It's that I can be so attracted to the approval of other people. That was my pattern then. I wanted the adults to like me. I was right out of college. And I wanted the safety of being able to say I work at Ogilvy and Mather. That was a very ego-y thing for me. And when I let it all go and I quit and I went to go play music, everyone thought I had lost my mind. like lost my mind. People were very upset and I didn't have a thing to lean on. And there is no amount of advice or coaching that can help you when it comes to that moment of committing all of you to this next step you're going to make. That is a very, very lonely place because it is you and you. And there's nothing I can say because it always feels like you want to run back and claw your way back up, like back up the sliding board or whatever it might be. But I really think that there's a point where there is no turning back. And that's, you kind of just got to go along for the ride. And my mentor, the same one who talked to me, he said, you know, if a plane is going down and you're on it, there's two ways to go. You can go screaming, or you can be like, okay, it's the last ride of my life. Whee! And I've thought of that so many times because it's sounds really callous, but it is so true. You know, this is it, you know, and I think it for all of us, there are those points where it does feel like the plane is like going down and, oh my God, what if I fail? And oh my God, what if everyone leaves me? And if you really step back and look at it and say, for me, I can look at it now and be like, wow, who I became in the process of losing everybody's approval and having the total disapproval of my family and my friends and everything was so much more important than having held on to their approval the whole time. Because then I went on my own journey and then I started creating CDs and then they all turned around as if, oh, we were with you all along. We totally got it. But there's no, I wish I could just give some, like, I know it's very popular to get on a podcast and say, well, here's your 3 steps.
Right. Yeah.
Can't do it. There is no, I don't want to lie to people. That moment means really getting clear, and it is never done without fear. You know, my clients have a hashtag. They say, do it scared. And I think there's a best-selling book out there with that title now, but that's a big one.
You mentioned some of the assessments. I DISC certified, so people are either like people oriented or task oriented, and I'm very task oriented. So if I focus on a task to a fault, sometimes I don't know who I'm knocking over to get there, and I have to be a little more people oriented. But I know people who are people oriented, and like you mentioned, the approval of others. What are people going to think? And I mentioned that term scarcity pimps. And we all have a little bit of a scarcity pimp in us, right? There's something but you write in the book about when you made that transition and getting the letters from your parents. And I have a really good friend who is my best friend. He was my first coach. He had an Epic Dads program, and he was talking about being an Epic Dad, and it spoke to me. I was like, I suck as a dad, and I hired him like that. But he's been a successful coach, I don't know, 10 years, 8 years, something like that. He still gets his parents saying, when are you going to get a real job? And it's like, you know, there's a certain amount of, you know, we sold everything and we left. And like the number one thing, some of our relatives, like it goes back to, hey, are you having a great time? Yeah, we're having fun. We're doing all these things. But what about you sold the dining room table? Like it always goes back to the dining room table. It always goes back to, but you gave up, you know, you worked so hard for that bachelor's degree.
Yeah.
Why are you doing this? How can you share how to get past that? And maybe you just did. There's no right or wrong. But when the scarcity pimps in your life, especially if you're people oriented, are doubters, are haters, etc. And yeah, you can say show don't tell.
Yeah.
But is it putting on the armor, putting your head down? Is it something else? Is it just tuning them out? Is it all of the above, or does it depend on the person?
Well, first thing I would say is that I think entrepreneurs are kind of the freaks of our world in that they find a different set of rules. They live from a place of truly abundance. And I don't mean abundance like, oh, all the world is great, but really that abundance mindset. And part of the reason for that is because they cross through these things you're asking about. And it's not that I have let go of that people's opinions thing. That still comes up, but that it's back to that thing I said where your business is the training ground for your soul's expansion. And I know no other way to put it, because if you are somebody who has a pattern of, I have to have people's approval, there is no fixing that pattern. There is no like, I'm going to wait till that goes away and then I'll do my thing. You walk through it and you feel the discomfort of it, and you realize you don't die, and that you realize that all that's conditioning and none of it's the truth. And you find out what's on the other side of that. And guess what? You'll go up that upward spiral, and you'll come back around and it'll happen again. Because like for you, you probably went through stuff when you built your company. Oh, yeah. And then the day you woke up and said, I don't want this anymore, you had to go through the same thing again. You know, now it's like, now I'm going to leave that behind. But I think part of what you describe is that everyone's holding on to so much, and it's back to that control. We think that we're controlling, we're holding on. Like, you bought the dining room table. How would you ever get rid of whatever it might be? You spent so much time in that, getting that degree that makes you miserable. You know, okay, but what price is your life? Mm-hmm. At what cost to you? I've known people who just stay with their whatever they've done because they spent money on that degree. And I think even Oprah talks about coaching someone who spent 4 years getting a law degree, like just top of the top, and realized she wanted to be a chef. And Oprah was mentoring her in some program she did. And her question for her is, at what cost? Like what is your life worth? And I think we all need, and speaking, one of the best entrepreneurs of our time being Oprah, like that's kind of what we all have to ask.
You end the book talking about decisions. Mm-hmm. And I think it goes back to flow and energy, and we get hit with those inputs. Some of us not get hit. We open ourselves up intentionally to inputs, especially now in 2020. And are you on Twitter? Are you on LinkedIn? Are you fearful? Are you angry? Are you mad? Pick the topic.
Yeah.
But decision fatigue is real. I have 10 of these shirts. All I wear are these shirts. I have one baseball cap. I had 30 before. Yeah. Because decision fatigue. I wake up, I don't even want to think about these little BS things that take my energy away. Can you real quickly explain decision fatigue and one tip that someone can take to just lessen those inputs so you can focus on the signal?
And what you just said is so important. And there are times when I read that people do what you just described, and I'm like, but I'm a girl. Like, we don't get to wear the t-shirt and the baseball cap and look however we feel like looking. Like, there's just so much more pressure. So I will say during quarantine, I've definitely got like I've got my little Lululemon costume. So in terms of the whole idea, the whole last section of the book is on decisions and having a business. And I do describe what it does to your brain to have unmade decisions. One of the best practices I know to eliminate that is there's a tool in the book called the Sunday Summit. It's our most popular tool here at Uplevel You, my company. And when you get the book, you can go download the tools that come with the book. But there's something called the Sunday Summit. And I'll tell you one little section that's on that. And it is a little section where you write down unmade decisions. And so you're describing things that you can put on autopilot, which is great. But too many of us, we let unmade decisions, like we go, I can't do that right now, maybe, I don't know what day. And what I teach my clients to do is every Sunday to just look at very intentionally, what are any unmade decisions that are out there, because that is eating up energy in your brain. That is eating things up. And it's there in the background, running and running and running. And once you get it on paper, it makes your brain not be storing it. It puts it out there so you at least know, okay, I have to decide this right now. And so that's part of that practice. But I would say there's two ways I look at decisions. One is what you're describing, that everyday decision. So I plan my meal. My equivalent of that is I actually plan all my meals out, and I eat kind of the same thing every day for the most part until the weekends. And then the other is the decisions that naturally pop up in business. Do you want to do this thing? Are you going to go to this? Are you going to speak at this place or whatever? And anything that's unmade, I think there should be like a clearinghouse day where you actually say, is there anything out there? And it's just a practice that's been game changing for me and for my clients as well.
I love that. And actually it came to mind in the book, when you talked about cleaning out your basement, but it is actually more appropriate here. When we sold our house, I have, tons of books from people I interview on the show, and just, I I would go back when we lived at Barnes and Noble, and I'd walk out with 7 books, but there was a lot of books that were unread. Some of them I felt are important books that I have to read. And so they were there. And when I was cleaning them out and putting them in there, and we donated them, when I put them, the physical act of putting them in a bag and bringing them out, there was something to it that I didn't realize how much energy it was taking up in the back of my mind.
Yeah.
I got to read that book someday. I got to read it because someone gifted it to me. I got to read it because I read in something. It's one of 100 books you should read. When I just got rid of them, it was amazing. And that's like such a small, stupid little thing. Imagine the big ones.
Same thing. And women do that with clothes. They either say, I have to keep that because I paid so much for it, or I have to keep that because I got it on sale, or I have to keep that because now I weigh so much and I don't fit into it anymore. I'm going to punish myself or wait till I get back there. There's so many games, and it doesn't matter the physical thing we're talking about. It is the process it's the holding on to the thing, and that it just eats up energy. When you just let go, things, it's much easier, even though it feels hard at that moment.
Well, Christine, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. We could go on and on. I got another 2 pages of notes here. The book is wonderful. For everyone listening, everyone watching, they're like, I got to go out and get the Soul Sourced Entrepreneur. Where can they get it?
So it is out on Tuesday, November 17th. That's tomorrow if people are here live. And you can pre-order it now on Amazon, of course. And what we are doing is that for everybody who pre-orders it, I'm doing an event. It's normally our annual event here in Asheville, and we're doing it virtually this year in December 9th, 10th, and 11th. And when you buy a book, that is your ticket. So I can send people to soulsourcedbook.com, and the details for how to get your ticket once you buy your book are there. And it's called the Click event. It's our Click retreat. And it's where we walk through the soul and the strategy of your business. So we're teaching marketing, sales, systems, and then also mindset alongside of it. And the way I see it is that when your soul track and your strategy track are fully aligned and fully clear, that's when everything clicks in your business. And so all you need to come, it used to be a $1,500 ticket. And now all we're doing is saying, hey, come buy a book. We're going to spend 3 days working on your business and getting you ready for 2021, because we're at a time where that mindset and that soul are so important, and learning how to trust yourself as you move forward. It's so important right now. So that's what we're doing.
We're going to put all that in the show notes. Go out, pre-order the book now. By the time this airs as a podcast next week, it'll be out. Go get the book. Uplevel You. People are like, I need Christine as my coach. I got to go. Uplevel You. Where should people go?
Oh, they can just go to ChristineKane.com. And I also have a podcast called The Soul Sourced Business. And they can go there and catch it. And I always say, it's form a relationship with someone, learn someone. I don't have a sign up page on my site. I don't just say, here, come work with me. I'll take your money. I really believe in the power of the relationship and really seeing that somebody's meant for you, and if this is the right person. The other thing is that if people do buy the book and come to the event, they really get a deep dive into the way I work as a coach and the way, I think about setting up a business and how it works for you. And you can see if you get results from the tools that I deliver on those 3 days, because it's pretty power packed.
Christine Kane, author of The Soul Sourced Entrepreneur, out November 17th, founder of Uplevel You. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been really fun. I may drive down to Chattanooga and find you somewhere.
Yeah. We're wandering around. Yeah. It's and thanks everyone for listening. Thanks everyone who joined us live. I'm your host, Kurt Mercadante. This is the Authority Brand Podcast.